Hello, and welcome to the Sustaining Soils podcast brought to you by Valent Biosciences. I'm your host, Lisa Peterson, and this is episode 2, Untangling Soil Health and Plant Health. We are excited you joined us today for our second podcast in this series. Last time, we explored the basics of soil health and then dived into some of the practical aspects of how it affects me as a farmer and how to incorporate soil health into our operations. So today, we're going to build off of that foundation and discuss the differences between plant health and soil health. Lately, it seems as more conversation has occurred around these two topics, the lines between soil health and plant health have blurred together. It's important for us to understand each one of these topics separately, so we can also understand how ultimately they work together. So before we dive much deeper, I wanted to introduce our guest today, Dr. Randy Martin. Welcome, Randy.
Thanks, Lisa. Happy to be here today.
Well, before we dive into our conversation, I do want to share with our listeners some background information on your career. I think they will quickly hear why we specifically invited you to join us today. Randy has earned his PhD in entomology, and he has over 30 years of experience in the agricultural biological space, from basic research and development to field commercial development and product technical support. Randy has been dedicated to building integrated programs that combine traditional and biorational technologies to provide new solutions for agriculture. Most recently, Randy served as the Global Technical Development Specialist for Valent Biosciences' soil health business, where he managed the global R&D programs for the broad range of biorational soil health products in development for Valent Biosciences and its affiliates. His continued interest in soil health and bringing awareness to soil health has kept him active post-retirement. We're so glad we could pull you out of retirement today, Randy, to join us for this conversation.
Well, it's certainly a topic that I'm very interested and very passionate about, and I'm happy to be able to continue to hopefully contribute to the science and to the discussion about soil health.
Thanks, Randy. Glad to have you with us today. And let's go ahead and dive right into our conversation. But I want to start with some of the basics. So let's review the broad definition of soil health. Can you tell us what soil health is?
Sure. I think the definition that people mostly use is one that was coined by the USDA. And it goes the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And I just want to emphasize, I think the key point in that definition is that it is a vital living ecosystem. So it's very important to remember that the soil is living. And we're going to talk more about that in today's podcast.
Thanks, Randy. I love how you pointed out that it is a living ecosystem. So with that being said, why is soil health important?
Well, soil health is important for a lot of reasons. And you know, we're coming to understand more and more of these reasons why soil health is important. But I just want to point out, you know, this is not a new concept at all. You know, people were concerned about soil health many, many years ago. In fact, there's a great quote from President Franklin Roosevelt that says, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." But the reason that soil health is so important is that, look, number one, soil drives food production, and a high-functioning soil or a healthy soil can help landowners be more profitable. Secondly, healthy soils can absorb and store water, and we all know how important water is to crop production, and it's becoming more and more limited as we see in the news. You know, thirdly, healthy soils can remove contaminants from water through physical, through chemical, and biological processes. And finally, healthy soils can sequester or store carbon and help reduce the effects of atmospheric carbon dioxide.
We've definitely heard a lot lately, Randy, about the effects of carbon and storing carbon in the soil. So what are the properties of soil then that can be managed to achieve better soil health?
There are three basic properties of soil that we have identified that we can measure and that we can also manage to, and that is the physical, the chemical, and the biological properties. A quick example of a physical property would be bulk density or texture. An example of a chemical property would be the salinity or the pH. And then, of course, the biological properties of soil going back to the definition that we talked about, that soil is a living ecosystem, we've started to recognize that the biological properties of soil are extremely important. And of course, the microbiome, or the family of microorganisms, is the bulk of what makes up the biological properties of soil.
Randy, you mentioned the biological properties of the soil, and that's where I'd like to dive in as we head into the rest of the podcast and spend some more time there. They're very important to soil health, as you said. Can you give us some more details around the biological side?
Sure. Well, like I said a minute ago, it's quickly becoming well recognized that the biological properties of soil is really what drives soil health. And understanding the biological properties, and I'm going to introduce this term microbiome. The microbiome is really the community of microorganisms, primarily bacteria and fungi, that are found living together in the soil. And one of the most important of the microorganisms is the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about those later in the podcast. But we know that microbes do so much in the soil, and quite honestly, there's a lot that we still don't know. So there are a lot of people around the world that are studying the microbiome. But for example, we know that microbes can reduce pathogen load in the soil by competing for resources such as space and nutrients. Microbes can also enhance the ability of the plant to obtain nutrients. And we know how important nutrients are to plant production. Now, microbes can also break down nutrients to make them available to the plant. And finally, we know that microbes have an influence on soil structure, such as water retention, water holding capacity, and erosion resistance.
So, Randy, what can growers do to create a better environment for the soil microbiome or the microorganisms that you were just talking about?
Well, I think broadly speaking, growers need to learn to farm the soil. Growers do a great job of farming the plants. We need to learn how to farm the soil. And some specific examples of this are creating a better environment for the microbiome or those microorganisms. That could include disturbing the soil less. So take a look at your cultivation program. Can you reduce the amount of cultivation? Can you go to a conservation tillage program? That will go a long way to enhance and diversify the microbiome. Rotating crops is another great example of something that growers can do, which most growers do anyhow. But again, that provides a different environment for different microorganisms to inhabit the soil. Planting cover crops is extremely important. It's important because the microbes need a living plant to function and to live and to reproduce. And a fallow field will just cause that microbiome to crash and go down to very low numbers. So having a cover crop program will go a long way to enhancing the microbiome. Keeping soil covered as much as possible is extremely important. So certainly a cover crop program is part of that, but also tillage and not necessarily turning the soil under so that you have bare soil. So keep it covered goes a long way to helping the microbiome. And finally, there are microbial inoculants or commercial products that growers can use and mix and apply just like they would normal crop protection products or fertilizers that growers can use in their fields and in their crops to enhance the existing microbiome.
Thanks, Randy. You have done a great job of really defining what soil health is and the properties of the soil and the microbiome and the microorganisms that exist in the soil. Now let's turn the tables and go to plant health. Let's understand what's the definition of plant health and how does that compare and contrast with soil health?
Lisa, these concepts are different, but they are very closely related. I like to think about plant health as a season-long concept. So you're managing the quality of that plant for the duration of its growing cycle, whether it's, an annual plant like a corn or soybeans, or whether it's a long-term crop like avocados or oranges. But, healthy plants are those that can grow and thrive under typical environmental stresses. And those could include drought, flooding, heat, but also attack by insects and other pests, nematodes, and even competition from weeds. When I think about soil health, it's more of a long-term concept. And, soil health is really not a destination. It's a journey, and it's almost like your own personal health. I think, we're always thinking about what can I do to improve my own health, whether it's eating better, whether it's exercising, getting more sleep, cutting down on smoking or alcohol consumption. You're never going to achieve this perfect health, and it's similar with soil health. However, managing the health of your soil will go a long way to managing the health and productivity of your crop, because a healthy soil will help to buffer against the normal stresses in a growth cycle. And I mentioned some of those stresses already: heat, flood, drought, and pests.
Randy, I love how you compared the soil health to those small incremental steps in your own personal health, right? And that's perfect for me as a farmer and for our farmers that are listening. I think it can at times can become overwhelming of everything that I should be doing to improve my soil health. But taking those small incremental steps will get us there along the way. We just have to make those changes slowly. And I know for me personally, that's reassuring that I don't have to do everything at once.
That's right, Lisa.
So, Randy, does a healthy soil guarantee a healthy plant or crop?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. The quick answer is no. However, having a healthy soil will go a long way to managing the health and productivity of your crop, because it helps to buffer against the normal stresses in the crop's growth cycle. We have to think of it as healthy soil being the foundation of a healthy and productive crop, but it's not a guarantee. I recently had a call with my financial advisor to just kind of go over things. Of course, we know that financial markets are kind of wild right now, and people are getting a little nervous, including myself. But we talked about the fact that, our investments are diversified. And think of soil health as the same way. When you diversify your investments, you're helping to buffer against those extremes in the marketplace. Is it going to guarantee that you make a lot of money in a down cycle? Absolutely not. But it will leave you in a lot better position than if you weren't diversified. And the same is true with soil health, and that's how I like to think about it.
Well, thanks, Randy. We've been pretty theoretical so far on the podcast. So the differences between soil health and plant health, let's dive that into the practical side of things. I farm. We have folks that are listening to us that farm. We have folks that are in the industry. Let's get this down to some practical pieces. So what are some of the best practices for growers, and how will these practices influence soil and plant health?
Yeah, great, Lisa. It's always good to get down to the practical. I like that. We touched on these just a minute ago. Number one is to disturb the soil less. We talked about the fact that excessive tillage can degrade soil aggregates, and soil aggregates really are formed by this network of living organisms. Excessive tillage destroys fungal hyphae, and it reduces crop residues. Number two is rotating crops. By having different crops in the soil, it helps to diversify the microbiome in the soil. It also helps to break the life cycle of soil-borne pests and pathogens. Number three cover crop program. Planting cover crops can help reduce erosion, can help to retain soil organic matter. It can help to promote soil biodiversity, and it can help to retain nutrients in the soil. And finally, using microbial inoculants to enhance the microbiome. These are commercial products that can enhance nutrient availability. They can improve water acquisition and retention. They can help to create stable aggregates that reduce erosion, and of course, optimize plant growth and yield.
So, Randy, I want to go back to one of the things that you said earlier there, and I want you to help me understand it a little bit better. You said the aggregates are formed by fungal hyphae. Help me understand that process. That's not something that, we've heard as farmers, we've heard rotating crops and planting cover crops. I think we really get that. But that was something that I guess personally I haven't heard before. Help me understand.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. It's a really interesting concept when we talk about soil aggregates. And let's distinguish that between what we call a stable soil aggregate. So an aggregate is much more than just a clump of soil. An aggregate is a clump of soil, but it's held together by this microbial glue that we know is produced by mycorrhizal fungi. And it's also held together by fungal hyphae, primarily mycorrhizae, that create kind of this net, this hyphal net, as we call it, that helps to stabilize these aggregates. And when you have stable aggregates, they are more resistant to erosion by wind and water. They also help to absorb water and retain water more than if you don't have them.
Randy, one of the other things that you mentioned was microbial inoculants. So tell me a little bit more about these and how that might impact my farming operation.
Yeah, Lisa, microbial inoculants are becoming more and more common in our industry. There are more and more products that are becoming available. And just quickly, the definition of a microbial inoculant is simply a product that contains living microbes. And by using these products, you're adding these microbes to enhance the microbes that are already in the field, and you're helping to create a more uniform population of these microbes, which will help to optimize productivity and yield.
So why not let nature do it?
Great question, Lisa. We could let nature do it, but nature moves pretty slowly. And because of the type of farming that we do, the large scale farming that we do, we're going in, we're cultivating, we're planting, usually on an annual basis. We're disturbing that microbiome that already exists. And it can take months or even years to build those microbes back to the level where they really need to be to benefit your crop. And so using these microbial inoculants to enhance the microbiome that's already there can really speed up that process, especially if you're growing an annual crop.
So, Randy, you've given us the definition and told us more about what a microbial inoculant is. Can you provide us some examples?
Sure, Lisa. Well, a very easy example, one which probably most people are familiar with, is rhizobium or bradyrhizobium used in soybean production. Most people that grow soybeans typically will plant those soybeans with an inoculant which contains a bacterium that helps to fix nitrogen or take nitrogen from the atmosphere for the plant. Another example of a inoculant that's available in the marketplace today is arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, or AMF. And AMF are unique in that they bring both short-term or in-season benefits as well as long-term soil health benefits. For plant health, mycorrhizal fungi expand root acquisition networks to improve nutrient acquisition and efficiency, as well as improve water acquisition and retention. And in the long term, mycorrhizal fungi can help to create stable soil aggregates that we talked about earlier. And these aggregates help to mitigate soil erosion, improve water infiltration and water holding capacity, as well as help to restore the carbon pool.
Randy, how can growers incorporate microbial inoculants into their current growing practices?
Lisa, Valent Biosciences has a line of products that go under the name of Microapply. And Microapply is a family of mycorrhizal fungi seed and soil inoculant products that contain a 4-species consortium of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. We've already talked about some of the benefits of mycorrhizal fungi. These products, or these 4 species, were selected for different soil environments and agricultural cropping systems, and they can help to provide critical plant functions throughout the crop cycle that we've already touched on. There are a number of Microapply products that you can choose from depending on the crops that you're growing and your application systems. There are products that are used for seed application. There are also products that can be put in furrow that can also be injected into sprinkler systems or irrigation systems, for example. Just kind of depends on what your growing system is and what kind of crops you're growing. But a lot of advancement has been made in the last 5 to 10 years. The quality of the products has greatly increased. The technology behind the formulations is very strong, and the shelf life stability of these products is also very good.
Randy, you bring up a great point that in the last number of years, we've seen a lot of advancement in this space, right? There's a lot of biologicals coming into the market. Soil health is getting its time to shine in the spotlight, right? We're starting to pay attention to that a lot more. What other new trends are you seeing in soil health and even plant health?
Well, I think to go along with what you just mentioned and what we've been talking about with inoculants, as well as some of these other best practices that we talked about, is let's start to measure and evaluate the benefits of these practices and these products and enhancing the soil microbiome. You know, the hard part is, Lisa, that these are long-term studies. When you're measuring soil changes in soil health, it doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 2 years. For example, we've set up studies at Valent Biosciences that will go for at least for 4 years. But there are a number of other groups around the world, and results are starting to come back in, very favorable results showing that enhancing the microbiome, whether it's by microbial inoculants or whether it's by doing some of the best practices that we talked about to enhance what exists, really does have a positive effect, not only on plant health, measured in terms of yield, but also in some of those soil health properties that we talked about. So I think that's really the trend that we're focused on right now. Is there's a lot of good information about what these best practices and what these products can do. Now we need to measure, and we need to be generating data to show that it will affect the bottom line of the grower.
That's a great point, Randy, because ultimately, if it doesn't affect my bottom line, it's really hard to get the adoption, right, and to speed that up.
That's exactly right.
And I think it's also a retraining that these things takes time. We're so used to seeing an immediate change, an immediate impact. We put nitrogen on our crop, we see the difference. We spray crop protection products, we see the weeds dying. And I think that's just such a mind shift and a mindset shift that we have to get used to as a grower, as producers, that we need to take a longer term view of this and of soil health and saying, hey, this isn't a one thing and done. This is a continual building blocks, and we continue to grow each year and build upon that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lisa. And you said it. Sometimes it's hard to think long term when you're thinking about the end of that crop cycle and my profitability for that particular crop cycle. But again, they're all intertwined, and one depends on the other. And so we just have to develop that mindset to think long term.
You are exactly right, Randy. And as we wrap up our time today, any final thoughts that you want to leave our listeners concerning soil health versus plant health?
Yeah, it's hard to nail it down to one or two, Lisa. We have covered a lot of ground and information here. Soil health is considered the new frontier in agricultural science. Obviously, we need to take care of our soils, and in particular, it's that living microbiome that we all recognize today as being so critical. Farmers need to learn to farm the soil, and understanding long-term soil health is a great way to start that. And finally, these microbial inoculants are becoming more and more common. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are a key component of the microbiome. These products are available commercially. They're high quality. They have great formulations. And, I would just encourage growers out there to talk with fellow farmers, talk with other folks, and try these products out.
Well, Randy, we have sure enjoyed you spending some time with us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge around soil health and plant health.
Happy to do it, Lisa. The pleasure was mine.
And I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us today as we've untangled the differences between soil health and plant health with Dr. Randy Martin. This has been the Sustaining Soils podcast brought to you by Valent Biosciences. We look forward to you joining us for our next podcast entitled Uncovering the Soil Microbiome. And don't forget to find us in the meantime on Twitter at Valent Biosci, LinkedIn and YouTube at Valent Biosciences, and the website at valentbiosciences.com. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we would sure appreciate it if you gave us a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more like-minded individuals like you.